Welcome to How to Invest in Sports Cards Like a Pro. I'm super excited you're here. Congratulations for getting the course. This is just the perfect time to start getting into sports cards. It's never been hotter as a market than it is right now. And let's get a little overview here. In this course, I'm going to cover where I find sports cards to buy and sell, what I look for to invest in sports cards, the 5 ways I make money with sports cards, the tools I use to research specific cards, how I buy sports cards like a pro, how I sell sports cards like a pro, and then some advanced selling tips. Before we get too far, I want to do a couple quick disclaimers. I don't know you. We haven't met in person. I don't know your specific financial situation. So this is not legal or financial advice. This is just I'm sharing my thoughts and experience with sports cards, what's working for me, and how I've been doing this for 20 years. Just like any investment, you can make or lose money with sports cards. And I personally only invest money I'm willing to lose in sports cards, just in case. And I approach it like a fun and entertaining hobby. So with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about me. So I was born in the 70s, and when I was a kid, baseball cards were just a huge deal. In fact, I'm amazed at how much a part of culture they were at the time. As kids, we always got together, we tried to trade with our friends, we had our collections and so forth. And I ended up with a modest collection, lots of cards, but actually very little of true value. So I started investing in sports cards seriously a little bit over 20 years ago. So I graduated out of college, got my first salary and a steady paycheck, and all of a sudden I realized I could buy any card I wanted, just about. So I started buying Barry Bonds rookie cards. So here's a picture of Barry Bonds' 1986 Topps traded rookie card. And I started buying the cards just because he was a pretty iconic figure at the time. I loved these cards, and specifically this year when I was a kid. So as soon as I got out of school and had some money, I just started buying up his graded rookie cards. Coincidentally, it was the year that he broke the single season home run record for 73 home runs. And so I ended up buying and selling cards all year long. I just started buying them, and all of a sudden the cards were going up in value. So I would buy more, and then I would sell some along the way. And by the time the season ended, I had sold just about all of my Barry Bonds cards for a pretty big profit. I'd made tens of thousands of dollars in just a baseball season. And I was pretty hooked at that time on buying and selling sports cards. So for 20 years, I've been more and less active buying and selling sports cards. When I had really young kids, it was harder to do. But now sports cards are more popular than ever, and it's a great time to get into and really understand what's going on in this space. So why I invest in sports cards? Well, it's fun, for sure. You're holding a piece of history. And, the buying and selling of sports cards is kind of like a sport in of itself. Looking for deals and auctions, trying to be the winning bidder in an auction to get a specific card to get your collection, and then to find really good cards to invest. So the fun part is you can make some money along the way as well. And the sports card market is booming right now. Here's a ESPN headline about how the coronavirus and the internet and tons of unexpected money are fueling the sports cards' biggest boom, and I'll take you through some of that data. But right now, there's never been a better time to in the sports card market. So I always find it inspiring to look at the most valuable cards, and just to give you a sense of how crazy the sports card market has become just recently. Let's look at the most valuable card ever sold. So the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. This is a PSA graded 9, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, that just sold in January for $5.2 million for one baseball card, which it's just unbelievable to think about these as, investment vehicles, and really, really valuable items. Right there, right next to it is the 2003 Upper Deck LeBron James autograph card. This is only 23 were made, and this was number 7 out of 23. And it also sold for $5.2 million in April. This is the Luka Doncic I'm not a basketball follower that closely, specifically, and this is a card that is one of one. So this autograph card, there's only one that was made, and it recently sold for $4.6 million. And amazingly, Mike Trout has just become this generational baseball player. His numbers and stats are just amazing. And here's another autograph card, one of one. So there's only one of these in existence, graded a 9, and it's worth almost $4 million when it sold in August of 2020. And then growing up as a kid, I knew the Honus Wagner card was the most valuable card around. I think it was the first card that ever sold for $1 million. And just recently, this card sold for $3.1 million. It's a 1909, and sort of the history of it is baseball cards were packaged on tobacco products. And I think the rumor or the lore is that Honus Wagner didn't want to be associated with tobacco products and requested that his card was not included. And there's only about, they believe, 50 to 200 of these cards that ever made it into circulation. And of course, being so old, it's hard to find one in great condition. This one apparently, as a PSA 5 grade card, is maybe one of the better conditions out there. Now, where to look for baseball cards? For the last 20 years, I would say the main place, all the action happens in one place, and that is eBay, which is just so funny that they were the major player when I started 20 years ago, and nothing's really changed. They're still the place to go to buy and sell sports cards. So I think the reason eBay does so well in this space is it's easy and affordable for anyone to get started buying and selling. The key to over time, obviously, would be to establish yourself with a great eBay rating. In order to sell, sports cards that are worth $1,000 or even tens of thousands of dollars, buyers will need to trust you, which is why it's so important to get your eBay account highly rated in a number of transactions. So for me, a great eBay rating looks like 50 or more positive reviews with 98% total positive feedback. And to do this, it takes time. Every transaction, you don't necessarily get positive feedback on eBay. I'm running somewhere between 25 to 33% of my transactions. I'm actually getting positive feedback. Otherwise, you don't get any feedback in eBay. And then a little bit later, we'll dive into the tactics to buy and sell. So when you think about eBay, if you're not using it currently, it was definitely the internet website in the late 90s, early 2000. It was kind of one of the first .com superstars. And I know Amazon has really taken over in terms of just buying regular household items. But in terms of buying and selling collectibles, eBay has really maintained its kind of leadership position. And just take a look at the types of cards and the cost of cards that have been sold on eBay just this week. So you can see here, $600,000 card, $150,000 card, $42,000 card, and tens of thousands of dollars for a specific card are all constantly flowing through eBay. People are buying and selling. And so, I think if you aren't currently on eBay in the market, you may not be aware of just how much business, how many cards go through there, and the total value of them. The dollar values are huge. So now I want to cover what to look for. What do expert sports cards investors look for to buy and sell? And here's a little hint of the two kind of major graded cards, PSA and BGS graded cards. So when you think about the value of a sports card, they're made of paper, they can easily bend, they can crease over time if you don't take care of them. The corners, which start out sharp, get rounded and worn. And so the value is directly related to the condition of the card that it's in and how well it was made and printed, which is a lot of that is out of our control. So how well centered is it? How bright and vibrant is the picture that was put on there? Are there any defects and scratches and so forth? So I tend to not buy loose cards, which is cards that aren't professionally graded, because you never really know exactly what you're getting unless you can see the card in person. But over eBay and things like that, I find that that can tend to be a little bit more risky to buy ungraded cards. So take a look at the, based on the grade, the player's cards to the left, this is a 10-point scale. The PSA 10 is worth a lot more than the card over here, the 2, where you can see some creases, some less intense, coloring than this one here and so forth. I'm sure if you could zoom in, the edges wouldn't be as sharp a corner as what you see over here. So, this is why expert sports cards investors primarily look and buy graded cards. A PSA graded 10 card, everybody knows it's as perfect a card can be. It's well-centered, crisp edges, there's no defects. And then as you go down to 9, 8, and so forth, everyone knows that those card values are pretty interchangeable, and there's not going to be really any surprises. So that way you know the value of what you're actually buying and selling. So the value of the card changes dramatically with the grade. So here's the Barry Bonds 10, which I've had bought before, of course. Less than 10% of all PSA graded Bonds cards actually end up to be a 10. And so when you look at by grade, the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, so a PSA 9 graded Barry Bonds card would be worth about $57, where the 10 is worth $455 today. So that's an example of just the huge differences in the value of a card based on its grade. You can see, a PSA 5 would be worth $9 and so forth, roughly. These are the average auction prices, and then all the way up here. So, and I've bought and sold maybe 100 PSA 10 Bonds rookies in my time, primarily around the time that he broke the home run record. So you can also look at graded card populations. So with PSA 10s being so rare, let's take a look at some examples here. So here's the 1996 Kobe Bryant rookie card from Skybox. There's over 4,000 cards that have been professionally graded by PSA to assign this 1 through 10 scale number to the cards. And out of those 4,000, only 24 have been given a 10 out of 10. And so you can see those cards are worth way more than the 9s and even the 8s. And actually, if you have an ungraded card in your collection that looks to be in really good condition, it's probably an 8, because you can see most of the cards, about almost half of all the cards that are sent in to be graded end up as a PSA 8. So that's just an example. If you look at the older card, like the Mickey Mantle, you can just see most cards here are between a 1 and a 5. So it's an older card. People likely didn't take as much care of their baseball cards at the time because it wasn't worth as much. It wasn't viewed necessarily as an investment at the time. So there's just so few 7s, 8s, or 9s. And then, of course, there's only 3 10s, and these haven't sold. So the $5.2 million card I referenced in the beginning is one of these PSA 9s. And if one of these was ever to hit market, I don't know, it'd be $10 million or more, I'm sure. All right, let's look at some different grading card companies. As I mentioned, PSA, they're really viewed as number one. People generally look for PSA graded cards, and they're kind of the standard for pricing and investments and so forth. BGS is from Beckett, if you're familiar as a kid, from the Beckett Sports Guide that told you how much your cards are worth. They also grade cards, and they have actually a pretty nice holder. I think it looks a little bit better than the PSA ones. And they're the second most popular grading company. And then there's a whole slew of what I'm calling other grading companies. So there's a BCCG, which is actually a lower tier Beckett grading. SGC is one, or SCG is one that's coming around. Here's an HGR. There's also one called USA. But primarily when you look at the big auction houses, they say that PSA graded cards cover about 80% of the graded sports card market. And that's actually where I recommend you start and spend most of your time when you're looking for graded sports cards. And really, really, I don't recommend buying or investing in any card that's graded from these other companies. you don't really know what you're getting with these. If it's a BCCG 9 and you were to send it into PSA, you don't know if you're going to get a 9 or an 8 or a 7. So the value of those cards, I don't think they're as transferable to what you get from PSA and BGS. And then comparing the two most popular ones, PSA grade cards are generally worth a little bit more than the BGS cards of the same grade. I'll take you through kind of my experience with this. So this is an example, but it's consistent with some average prices that I've seen in general. So if you look at, here's a BGS 8 Kobe Bryant rookie card, which recently sold for $1,500. And then the PSA 8 version of it sold, 3 days later for almost $2,100. And that's not uncommon to find roughly 30% premium for the same graded PSA cards. And of course, it'll depend on the card and the year and so forth, but just wanted to give you some examples that PSA really sets the standard, and that's what I spend most of my time investing in. And I'm going to share my generic experience with these grades. You can use it as a rough guide, but you have to do your research on each specific card as you're looking at it. We saw in the previous example where PSA was worth more than BGS, so let's see how that looks down. For a PSA 10, I'll come back to this one, but PSA 9, the next one down, usually that's where a BGS 9.5 is pretty close in price. And I see that a BGS 9, as we mentioned, might be 30% lower than a PSA 10. And a PSA 8 is where a BGS 8.5 would come in, and then the BGS 8 is slightly lower, and so forth, as you can see. Now, the exception to this example is BGS 10s. I've seen them go a little bit more than PSA, especially if they're what they call black label 10s, which is every subgrade is a 10. Those will sell more than a PSA 10 because they're kind of more rare, and BGS at that level is a little bit more particular, I think. But in general, when I'm buying and selling sports cards, a rough estimate is I subtract a half a point from BGS. So if I'm looking at a 9.5, I think, well, it's probably going to be worth about a PSA 9. And we mentioned that the example. Great. So now we're going to get into how I have made money with sports cards.